Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the geography of Middle-earth's ancient days, specifically of Beleriand and its realms. If you've ever stared at a fantasy map and wondered how it actually functions as a living, breathing world, well, you're in the right place. Together, we are going to map out an incredibly high-stakes geopolitical chessboard. We're looking at a time of starlit peace in the western regions of Middle-earth, but make no mistake, it is a fragile peace hanging by a very thin thread in the north.
Okay, let's jump right in. To truly grasp the layout of Beleriand, you have to look at it as a landscape entirely defined by a tense, cold war and a desperate siege. The Eldar, the elves, aren't just passively living here. They are actively holding a leaguer, which is basically a massive military blockade against the Dark Lord Morgoth after their victory in the Third Great Battle. Every river, every mountain pass, and every hidden forest is heavily dictated by this absolute military necessity.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Morgoth's northern fortress, 2. The western Elven realms, 3. The River Sirion's journey, 4. The hidden kingdom of Doriath, and 5. The eastern marches and Osiriand.
Section 1. Morgoth's northern fortress.
We're starting our tour exactly where all eyes in Beleriand are constantly, nervously fixed. The absolute north. Picture the extreme environmental contrast here. On one hand, you have Thangorodrim, these massive, thunderous towers made entirely of ash, slag, and the toxic refuse of subterranean furnaces, constantly choking the sky with foul smoke. But then, right on the doorstep of this literal hell, lies Ard Galan. It's a wide plain that burst into incredibly rich green grass when the sun first rose. Because Morgoth is essentially trapped inside his fortress, swift elven horses actually ride freely over this blooming green expanse, right up to the shadow of his black towers. And backing up that dark fortress, the arid Angband, literally the Iron Mountains. In ages past, Morgoth reared these mountains in a massive east-to-west curve to act as a giant geographic fence. They hid the endless dungeons of Angband, the Hells of Iron. Now, the crucial context you need here is that during an ancient war, the Valar were in such a huge hurry to overthrow him that they didn't fully search out all those deep places. So, Morgoth was able to return and build a mighty new gate at the end of a great tunnel beneath those very mountains. Talk about a costly oversight, right?
Section 2. The western Elven realms.
Sweeping west from those northern threats, we find the primary bulwark defending Beleriand. To understand the defense, we really need to know who holds power where. Up in the cool, misty lands of Hithlum, we have the High King, Fingolfin, and his son Fingon. Their people are the most hardy, the most valiant, and honestly, the ones Morgoth hates and fears the absolute most. Moving west toward the coast, you've got Turgon and Nevrast, a milder, hollow land sheltered from the north winds, wrapped around the great, bird-filled marshes of Llanewin. And finally, down south, we have Finrod in Nargothrond, holding the largest realm of all. Let's zoom in on Finrod for a second, because his influence was just massive. He wasn't just holding a single fortress. He was the overlord of almost everything between the Central River and the Western Sea. He forged this amazing alliance with the local Grey Elves, specifically Círdan the shipbuilder, and together they used Noldor and stonecraft to completely rebuild the coastal havens into these beautiful harbors with solid stone piers. Finrod even raised a watchtower, Barad Nimros, to look out over the ocean. But get this, the watchtower? Totally unnecessary. Turns out, Morgoth and his minions literally despised the water and would never willingly go near the sea unless they absolutely had to. Section 3. The River Sirion's journey. Moving right to the center of the map, we have the Great River Sirion, the absolute spine that divides west and east Beleriand. Think of this massive waterway as a geographic anchor, renowned in song. It shapes every single realm around it. Flowing for a staggering 130 leagues from the northern mountains, it gathers strength from countless tributaries. It acts as the literal lifeblood of the continent before finally fanning out into a sandy, reed-filled delta that is completely empty of living things, save for seabirds. But hey, it's not all scenic riverbanks. Just east of the upper river lies Nan Dungortheb, translated as the No Land, and it is a horrifying anomaly. It's filled with this deadly gloom left behind by the monstrous spider Ungoliant, and her foul offspring still lurk there weaving evil nets. Even the Thing waters spilling down from the nearby mountains of terror are defiled. Drinking from them literally fills your heart with shadows of madness and despair. It is the ultimate bad neighborhood, and the elves avoid it completely, only passing through if they have absolutely no other choice.
The Sirion doesn't just flow peacefully the whole way down either. At a certain point, the land sheerly drops off. The river falls into immense subterranean tunnels delved out by the sheer weight of its own water, flowing entirely underground for 3 whole leagues. Then it violently bursts back out at the gates of Sirion, issuing forth with deafening noise and throwing up mist that looks like smoke through massive rocky arches. It's a truly stunning display of raw natural power. Section 4, the Hidden Kingdom of Doriath. Following the Sirion just above those mighty falls, we hit a totally isolated pocket, Doriath. This is the abode of Thingol, the Hidden King, and he is hidden thanks to the girdle of Melian. Now, this isn't some physical wall of stone. It's a literal force field of magical power maintained by his queen, Melian. It fences the guarded woods, even crossing over the river to protect the great oak trees of the West March. It ensures absolutely no one passes into this realm without Thingol's express will. So while the rest of Beleriand prepares for all-out war, Doriath just sits there, perfectly sealed and protected. Just southwest of those guarded woods, before the river takes its subterranean plunge, the landscape flattens out into Ethilin Uil, the Twilight Mars. Here, the raging flood of the Sirion is actually slowed down, stayed by enchantment, and wanders through many channels into sprawling pools and marshes. The whole area is heavily wrapped in eerie mists, creating this quiet, highly mysterious buffer zone before the land suddenly drops off. Section 5, the Eastern Marches and Assyrian. Looking finally to the east, we are exploring Beleriand's wildest, most open frontiers. Because these eastern borders completely lacked the heavy mountain protection of the west, they were incredibly vulnerable to Morgoth's attacks. So the defense here was anchored by the fierce sons of Fëanor. Check out this defensive network. Mithras built his chief citadel on the wide, freezing, treeless hill of Himring. His brothers Saelagorm and Curufin heavily fortified the steep, narrow pass of Aglon. And to ensure Morgoth couldn't just sneak an army around them, they maintained a massive, rapid-response cavalry force endlessly patrolling the empty northern plains of Lothland. Down south in the east lies Osiriant, which is heavily defined by its own river network. The primary artery here is the River Sirion, which is actually twice as long as the Sirion, even if it's a bit less full. Tumbling steeply down from the eastern Blue Mountains are its 6 swift, turbulent tributaries. Together, these waterways create a vibrant, rushing landscape known as the Land of 7 Rivers. It's an entirely different vibe from the misty, quiet meres of the west. The inhabitants of this green country were uniquely adapted to it. The green elves who lived here were absolute masters of stealth. Clad in green for the spring and summer, they could blend so perfectly into the environment that you could walk from one end of their country to the other and literally never see a single soul. But you definitely hear them. They filled the land with a singing so incredibly beautiful that the Noldor actually named the region Linden, meaning the land of music. Now, sandwiched tightly between those swift rivers of the east and the central powers of the west, lay a massive, untamed no-man's land called Toar Imdunath, the forest between the rivers. This was a wild, tangled expanse where absolutely no one went, except maybe a few wandering dark elves. It brilliantly emphasizes just how fractured these great kingdoms truly were. Despite being a united front against Morgoth, vast, impenetrable tracts of wilderness kept their shining fortresses entirely separated from one another. Which brings us to a rather chilling realization to wrap up our explainer today. The records specifically note that while their realm lasted, none of the mighty Noldor ever crossed over those eastern mountains. Little news, and always late, ever came into Beleriand of what was passing in the vast regions of the east. So I leave you with this to ponder. In a landscape so obsessively organized for war against a known enemy in the north, what unknown threats, or perhaps untold allies, lay completely hidden just off the edges of this meticulously drawn map?